Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is a battle between budget knives, reigning champ, the Kershaw Natrix, and its contender, the Beluga by Petrified Fish. Closer in size and price to the Natrix XL than the mid-size. I'll be using the XL model for comparison. The build specs are the Natrix comes in at 8 3/4 of an inch in overall length with a weight of 4.1 ounces, and the Beluga has an overall length of 8 3/6 of an inch and weighs in at 5.5 ounces. That being the face-off / weigh-in, I'll let the battle begin with blade geometry and performance.
Fight!
I would define the XL's blade as a drop-point sheepsfoot hybrid. The blade has a continuous belly with no flat edge along the 3 3/4 of an inch flat grind. The blade is rather thin at 110 thousandths of an inch compared to the Beluga's 140 thousandths of an inch, more conventional drop-point shape with a flat edge and a steep belly. Although the Beluga's blade is thicker, it has a much more acute tip, and the 3 62/100ths of an inch blade sports a full flat grind that seems to pass through thicker materials with less resistance. I prefer the steeper belly, and I find myself having to raise my hand higher to initiate draw cuts with the XL. So the win goes to the Beluga. Next up will be build materials used. The Natrix blade steel is 8CR13 MOV, and the Beluga's blade is K110 steel, a D2 equivalent. Both knives' base models have G10 scales, and while it's probably the mill pattern and contouring, the Beluga scale feels a bit better. In addition, for a $2 price increase, the Beluga has a micarta option, which is still $1 cheaper than the XL. Sporting a stronger steel, a more attractive G10, and a second material option earns the Beluga its second win in the battle. Moving on to deployment plus degree of difficulty to use, one of the reasons I'm so fond of the Natrix series is its dual means of deploy. Its curved, non-aggressive flipper tab that works very well, and the full-length fuller for all us fanatics out there. Sporting Kershaw's patented subframe lock, this lock is left fully exposed. I've seen many videos of people saying the fuller area is too slippery or smooth to be functional, and I've also heard just as many complaints about the lock release being equally too smooth and slippery. With the lock being exposed, finger placement and finger pressure also becomes an issue, especially for lefties that report deployment seizing up. The subframe has never been an issue for me, but I can understand the complaints. The Beluga sports two deployment options as well, a thinner, more edgy fuller, and its front flipper tab. The fuller is definitely easier to break the detent with and not fail the deploy, but the front flipper's flat edge, if misfired, is unforgiving, and you pay up immediately with pain. So I definitely prefer the XL's tab. Even though the Beluga's tab seems big, it's actually a hair smaller and sticks out from the frame less than the XL's tab. The Beluga utilizes a liner lock that is protected against finger pressure and placement by the outer scale. In addition, the show size scale has been reduced to easily access the release area from the side, and the lock bar also has a mill to reduce the straight edge along the steel. Again, the Beluga earns yet another check in the win column. Next is durability, which I believe the XL's is compromised by its claim to fame, the subframe lock. The lock allows the rest of the build to be constructed from materials that are not regularly used on a lockside frame or handles such as G10 or the softer metal copper version seen here. The direct trade-off is structural integrity. The XL does have an internal stop and two standoff barrels stabilized by a plastic spacer, but all these, in addition to the pivot, are affixed directly to G10. The Beluga's hardware is completely steel to steel, down to the pocket clip that mounts directly to the frame by passing underneath the scale. The XL's G10 has failed on me once before. While trying to open a mid-size model that's pivot had factory Loctite, I stripped out the hex-shaped lock side milled area just enough to free spin, ruining the knife. So personally, my money would be going on the steel-to-steel construction of the Beluga. Kicking ass and taking names, the Beluga is off to a 4-0 start. Continuing down the list, next is carry and footprint. Starting with the obvious, the XL is well over an ounce lighter than the Beluga. Even though the XL's handle at 5 inches is longer than the Beluga's at 4 74/100ths of an inch, the XL is much slimmer at 49/100ths of an inch, while the Beluga lives up to its name, coming in at a tubby 59/100ths of an inch thick, due to its non-nested liners and thicker contoured scales. Both clips function well and conceal the entire handle. For in and out of the pocket, I actually prefer the straight build tip as opposed to the X-curve style bend that does serve its purpose in another manner. The Beluga's clip screws sit flush with the scales, and the XL's clip screws protrude beyond the clip's mount, but this has never caused an issue functionally speaking. So the XL finally fights back and takes a win. Ergos is up next, and the Beluga's arched rectangle shape is a neutral handle, while the XL has a dual top line to aid in canting the blade's tip forward when held further back on the handle. The XL's thin handle and hump between the top lines, in my opinion, wear into my palm quicker than the Beluga's handle over a longer period of hard use. The S-type bend on the clip actually makes the clip invisible to the touch or unfelt when I squeeze down, and the straight build XL's clip either becomes an annoying hotspot or wraps around a finger, forcing finger placement similar to a scalloped area. The Beluga does have a scalloped area as well, but it isn't severe on the lock side, so the fingers fall free. And the XL's lock release area isn't even, to be fair, but it's a hell of a lot closer to being even than the Beluga scales. So again, the Beluga wins another category. Next is build hardware that will lead into ease of disassembly. Neither build has hard steel screws, to which I've had issues with both. Kershaw uses red Loctite on the body screws, so I've stripped a few. And as for the Beluga, I've stripped the actual screw's thread, putting in the shorter pocket clip screw first, which I believe was incorrect. Nonetheless, the thread folded under pressure. Luckily, Petrified Fish included an entire extra set of crappy hardware, and it's the thought that counts, so I won't complain. Neither of the build's pivots are bad, and while both builds come on cage bearings, the Belugas are ceramic, and it has an additional pair of phosphor brown washers for its changeable pivot system. All this, plus the extra set of crappy screws, earn the Beluga an ugly win, but still a win. Disassembly is up next on the list, and both builds only require removal of the pivot and 2 body screws to open. Although it takes a pair of needle nose pliers to unhinge screws from the standoffs, I will set that issue aside for the moment. In order to remove the pocket clip on the Beluga, 2 more additional screws must be removed. The XL's clip isn't reversible. Yes, the holes are there, but a huge design failure is the subframe is anchored to the scales via 3 screws, plus the 2 clip screws. Anyone who has tried to switch clip positions has lost some detent, if not all. So for this reason, not the Loctite issue, which is bad enough, Kershaw doubled down with his foolery and loses yet another category. The next few categories play more of a subjective role, so opinions may vary due to user preference. First being aesthetics. And I can honestly say I've always been a fan of the XL's design, but I know it's polarizing and most people either hate it or love it, while the Beluga is more of just the general shape that comes to mind when someone says knife. In addition to being more palatable to the public, the Beluga's lack of additional body lines on the scale side is definitely more appealing, personally, than the raised textured areas running along the XL scales. Although boxy from the top and side profiles, I prefer the Nokia phone shape more than the contoured and angled profile on the Natrix, and it often rocks back and forth when I sit it down between the dual top lines due to its awkward handle shape.
To the left. Take it back now, y'all. Turn it out.
The Natrix dance. The XL's blade and fuller sit much more proud from the frame than the compact and tucked in look of the Beluga. Pocket clip wise, both builds look like shit. Both black coated with company or model name, the Belugas annoyed me so much I removed its coating by day 2. I never really complained about the XL's pivot, but looking at it, it does remind me of an ugly ass 20-inch rim from an old Chrysler 300 or those factory Dodge rims that look like flowers to me. And the Beluga's pivot isn't amazing or mind-blowing, but I do prefer its polished or brushed hardware much more. In the open position, it's no competition at all. The Beluga's show side is a heck of a lot cleaner, sporting only Nashorn Knives maker's mark. The XL, of course, for a second and even larger statement, tells you it's a Kershaw. The Beluga tells you its producer via the pivot. And it, just in case you forgot, the model number and steel is on both knives. But Kershaw even lets you know the blade color and Kai, which is Kershaw's Chinese factory. And by the way, if you didn't know, yep, Kershaw tells you down just below the detent track.
China.
And I might have to see if they put reassembly instructions on the inner frame wall and pack me a lunch with toast while they were at it, you know?
You know, I love the fucking breakfast in the morning. Even for breakfast, you say, can I get some toast, some eggs, some coffee? How would you like your toast, sir? You can have black toast, green toast, white toast, fucking rye toast, Russian toast. I just want some toast. Give me some fucking toast.
But seriously, the flipper tab in the open position can't beat out the Beluga's tabless look, in my opinion. And even if Kershaw made a tabless variant, hint hint, ZT, the handle's hump that protects the stop pins, open and close areas from being exposed still breaks up the body lines. Not to mention, due to that heavy ass subframe and clip on the lock side and the light in the ass G10 show side, coupled with the thin rounded tab, the XL can't stand upright in the open position. It just keeps falling over.
Funny fat guy fall off face.
I won't take aesthetic points away for this, but obviously the Beluga is swimming in W's. Next is fit and finish. While many people judge fit and finish mainly on insert gaps and blade centering, etc., I usually start with the build action. The smoothness and blade travel, feel in hand, then these previous points come into play. The Beluga also has a ceramic detent and the XL's is steel. The cage bearings in the Beluga ride directly on the blade's tang and the race milled into the liner's wall. The XL steel bearings run along extremely thin steel washers that always flare, bow, and warp like mushroom tops. And I only mention this because it plays a huge part into build action and tolerance. Even though the XL's build is larger, it's not tuned to shut without a shake or a thumb push. This XL's tune is in factory and is way more glassy than out of the box action. And yes, as you can see, it can be tuned to be rolled shut on hydraulics. But after a simple cleaning, this is an action my Beluga had since day 3 or so. This is, in my opinion, 85% tolerance and tune, coupled with 15% blade weight reaction. Pure roll shut, meaning I can rotate the handle and the blade will kind of hang in place due to the small amount of resistance. And if I stop, the blade just sits suspended. And when I resume the roll, the blade starts to fall again. The only part the blade's weight plays, in my opinion, is encouraging the blade into the sweet zone, so to speak. It's the area in which the detent takes over and pulls the blade fully closed. As I stated, this can be tuned, but it took me about 30 or 40 minutes to properly tune the XL in this manner, while the Beluga for the most part comes this way. Although the Beluga is stacked like a sandwich with scales and liners, the millwork and spacing is much cleaner than the gap between the subframe and scale, or even the XL's clip stacked on top of the scale with the screws on top of it all. For all these reasons, again, my beloved XL takes a back seat. Value is the final category, but for $3 less, the Beluga offers a better steel and blade geometry, a true reversible clip, an unmatched action, a changeable pivot system, a set of extra crappy hardware, not extra crappy, but an extra set of crappy, you get it. And for $1 cheaper than the XL, an additional scale option. So I'm not going to drag it out, it's obvious where the better value is at. It pains me to say, it was worse on paper than I thought. And I'll do the XL a favor and not give a tally recap, but just say the XL only won one category. So hail to the new champ, the chosen one.
She is the chosen one.
All hail the queen!
All hail Queen Gidget!
No, but in all seriousness, I still love the Natrix lineup, but the Beluga simply is the better knife for me and my daily use. And you gotta be honest, just look at her go. And I believe I may have a 2021 budget buy contender as well. So comment down below with your thoughts on the budget battle. Which build do you prefer and why? Hit the like button and share the content. And please sub to the channel for more uploads. And with that, I'll be signing off from the Fuller Fanatic.